Thank you, Ann, for the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 liftoff for episode number 3 of the Take Flight Financial Wellness Series. Now, good afternoon to anyone tuning in live, but to anybody who found us on Alerus.com/take flight and you're watching it after the fact, good whatever time of day it happens to be for you. I'm Matt Schartow, and we have a special one for you today for episode number 3. Now, I apologize for my absolutely insanely plain background. I'm moving into a new spot in my house, going upstairs, where I'm going to have an office space. So now I'm actually calling to you from my home office as opposed to the corner of my bedroom, which was my home office. As always, joining with me today is Ann, and she's going to be handling the Q&A portion and monitoring the chat and everything. But we have a special guest, Logan Shanks, all the way from, well, Logan, why don't you tell us where you are calling in from today?
I'm calling in from Charleston, South Carolina. It's a breezy, balmy 50 here compared to like the 25 it is where you are. So I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah, thanks for that. You haven't been there very long, have you? You just moved down there recently?
Yeah, actually, today is 6 weeks. I've been here for 6 weeks, so it's a nice change of pace having it be 75 and sunny Saturday versus the snowy days you had. I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah, Logan's a smart one. You can see there he's got all kinds of letters after his name, AWMACFPCRPC, and he was smart enough to say work from home. Home doesn't have to be in the cold. So a couple different housekeeping items before we get into the meat of it. Anybody joining right now, you are joining on mute. So, but the fact that Ann and Logan could hear me means that you also should be able to hear me. And of course, you see on the screen there, if something is wrong with audio, you can always go after the fact to Alerus.com/take flight. Now, if you want to change the display on your screen and for some reason see our faces bigger on the screen and the content a little less, I'm not sure why you would want to do that, but you can in the top right corner by using the icon that you can see circled right there. If you do have any questions, please put them in the Q&A and not in the chat. That's what Ann will be monitoring. You may have met Ann on our last 2 episodes of the webinar series where we were talking about risk tolerance last week. Well, now she is behind the curtain checking on the Q&A. So please enter any questions into the Q&A section, and then if there's one that we didn't cover at the end, then Ann will mention those. Now, after today's webinar, if you want more information or you just want to tell us how great it was and how great Logan looks in that suit and tie, you can always fill out the survey. It's just a few questions, and then if you have any questions after that or would like someone to contact you, you can do that through the survey. Then no matter what we're talking about today, keep in mind that every time we do one of these webinars, we are going to cover a variety of different financial topics. First off, the very first one we did, we talked about getting your entire financial life in order using the My Alerus platform. Then we talked about risk tolerance and investing on a very high level. Well, today we're going to get into a little bit more specifics of what we should be doing at different points in our life. And once again, as always, if you ever miss anything in the future, you can always go to Alerus.com/take flight. Well, here's our topic, and this is why Logan is with us today. We're going to talk about contributing to our retirement plan, but not just contributing to the retirement plan. We're going to talk about what we should be doing in terms of saving for retirement at different points in our life. Because saving for retirement and looking towards the time where we stop working is much different for a 20-year-old than for a 40-year-old than for someone who is about ready to retire. And that's why we have Logan here. Logan, I'll throw it back to you right now. Tell us what you do for a living.
Yeah, thank you for that, Matt. So I wear a couple different hats for Alerus. As a financial advisor, mainly what I do is I help advise either my clients, my prospects, or people who are part of our retirement plans here with trying to figure out what their retirement looks like, where they are in the game of retirement, and what they should be doing next to take advantage of the remaining working years, or how to plan out their retired year. So there's a couple different things that come with that, but we'll be able to get through most of that here today.
Perfect. Well, that's why we brought you on, because you talk with people all the time people of all different ages about what they should be doing for retirement. And my guess is that people of different ages come in and you don't give them all the exact same advice, do you?
No way. Just as there's not one perfect car or perfect house for everybody, there's no perfect, path to retirement. So no, everybody gets specialized advice.
Exactly. So there's not one exact cookie cutter thing for everybody. And I know that you don't necessarily favor. I have heard some podcasts and people on TV and radio like to give, what one should have at this age. You should have this dollar amount, which is a multiple of one's income. And then at this age, you like this exact dollar amount, which is a multiple of their income. At that age, I know you don't necessarily like to follow that exact path. You like to go about it a bit differently. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think if you subscribe to that or you scroll through, one of the many different news outlets, you'll find that a lot of people say like at 30, you should have 1 times your salary, 2 times your salary, at 44, at 40, at 50, 6 or 8 at 60, and then 10 when you retire. I don't really subscribe to that. I don't believe that that's typically going to be the case that somebody should shoot for, just because you can't control what the markets do, right? If you're at 39 years old, turning 40, and the market falls 40%, all of a sudden you can feel like you're this big failure, and that could start, eating at your mind, even though you're doing everything right and you just had a really bad turn of the market. So I think instead of that, what I try to suggest people do is just focus on the controllables, which is how much are you saving, how much are you spending, and then your risk for retirement.
Well, that's fantastic advice for this year, because I think anybody tuning in right now or in the recent future knows that there's a lot that we couldn't control in 2020. There is just all kinds of uncontrollables, so control the things that you can. So let's look at age 20 to 30. We're just getting into our working years. Maybe we're starting out our career. I've talked to a lot of people, and sometimes they sit with me, and if they're in this age range, they say something like, I just got my first big boy or big girl job. Those are things that I hear all the time. What kind of action steps would you have for somebody at this point in their life, age 20 to 30, just getting going here?
Yeah, so age 20 to 30, we're typically talking to people who have their first big boy or big girl job, like you just said. In that case, you're going to want to typically, first and foremost, enroll in your employer's retirement plan. Hopefully, you're part of the group that has some kind of a match or contribution that your company gives you, and so you really want to take full advantage of that. That's free money. So enroll in your employer's plan. Develop a spending plan. Now, this is counterintuitive to what a lot of people think, because again, people think it's all about savings, but how much you spend is really going to be what allows you to, the tried and true example of that Starbucks coffee, or for me, I'm a big pizza guy. Now, how often are you going out to eat and spending unnecessary money, figuring that out? Then building an emergency fund comes next. I think, as you just referenced, this year showed a lot of things to people. What I hope it showed in one of the positive takeaways is that, everything could happen that we could expect. And so I think that's a real positive in the sense of we need to be prepared for everything rather than just running full forward thinking that we're, Superman or a woman and then having something happen. So having an emergency fund will help alleviate some of those pains that we might go through in years like this. Pay down debt. That's going to be your typical first car. It's going to be your student loans, your credit cards, and potentially a house. And then taking advantage of compound interest. And so when you're, 25 to 30, you have 40-ish years of compounding that you can really take advantage of. I think that it's just an incredible time to start saving, even if it's a couple bucks, to see how that compounds out over an entire work history.
Yeah, I like how you put enroll in your employer's retirement plan first. Now, if you are lucky enough to have a match, of course, that's a great rate of return right there. So you always want to maximize the match from your employer if you're getting one. But of course, if you don't have an employer plan, a lot of people listening to this might have an Alerus retirement plan, but I know that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. If you don't have an Alerus retirement plan, you can always put money in something like an IRA, like a traditional one, or a Roth IRA. So there are retirement plans out there for you if you don't necessarily already have an Alerus one. Now, let's talk a little bit more about this compounding interest, because money today is worth a whole lot more in the future if you are getting interest, and the cost of waiting can be huge. Let's walk us through this, please, Logan.
Yeah, so as you can see right here, I just said the example of 25 to 30. Here we have someone who's 25 years old, making a reasonable $25,000. That's a pretty darn good starting salary. That's about what I was making right out of college with a degree. You have a 2% yearly starting or yearly salary increase with 3% deferrals and a 6% rate of return. All these are important numbers in the grand scheme of things, but for this, all we need to know is, really these numbers: $25,000 of income, how much are you deferring, which is 3% of that, and then the 6% rate of return. Our deferrals total over the next 42 years, $48,647. But that compound growth of that 6% rate of return turns that into $178,830. When you look at what 3% of $25,000 is, you're only saving $750 to start off with for an entire year. That goes back to what I just stated earlier, is that it's just the little things that help get us there. Now, when we're looking at the age of 35, what happens when we then wait 10 years to start saving our retirement plan, be it at your employer or outside of your employer if you don't have one of those? If you start at the age of 35, the same salary, same increase in salary, same deferral and rate of return, you're saving $33,000, and that $33,000 turns into $88,206. Now, that's still a pretty good return. You've still made $55,000 over the next 32 years. I don't think too many people would complain about that, but to be able to see the side by side, like the next slide, is pretty eye-opening, right? And so if we go to the next slide there, Matt, you're going to see the difference between starting at age 25 and age 35 is pretty big. There's a $15,000 deferral difference, right? So we didn't defer $15,000, but our account balance more than doubles. It goes from $88,000 to $170,000 over that additional 10 years of compounding. And so I think that this is a pretty darn good example of why you should start saving earlier rather than later.
Yeah, that's a difference of $90,594. I'm not that good at math. I just did the math before we started, and I have it written down on a piece of paper right here. I also think it's worth mentioning that if your company is giving you a match, and this is not counting any free money that you might get from your company through a company-sponsored retirement plan, if one is lucky enough to have that. So tack that all the way onto the top, and then give also that a 6% rate of return compounding. I know people are always, it kind of blows their mind when you talk about money doubling over the years, because you think, okay, you got 10 grand, and if it doubles 4 times, no, that's not 40 grand. You don't just multiply by 4. 10 becomes 20, becomes 40, becomes 80. And I know you as a financial person go by the rule of 72. How long does it take for money to double? But I just like to use really easy numbers like 10 and then keep multiplying by 2. So we're getting older. We're into the age 30 to 45. Here's my range. I'm sitting in here, so I'm sitting down with you. I'm like, I'm in this range. Logan, what are some action steps for me?
Yeah, so as you can see here, we have increased contributions to your retirement plan. This typically comes about because from age 30 to 45, hopefully we've paid down some of those debts that I was talking about in that first slide of 20 to 30. Hopefully we've paid off our car. Hopefully we're not carrying a credit card loan. Hopefully, we're moving into paying down that house, and there's limited debt that we have outside of there. So with less debt, we should then have more income plus those hopeful salary increases allow us to increase our contributions to our retirement plan. As we started this entire conversation, I think instead of shooting for multiples of your income to be saved, a total of 15 to 20% of income should be saved over the long term, and that should help you retire. That's in addition to your own. So as you just stated, if your employer is giving you, 5%, then you should only be really looking forward to saving 10 to 15. Any more than that's great, but those should be the numbers that we're looking for, especially in this setup, this chunk of your age. From there, read the fine print, learn about your options. So when you look at your retirement plan, when you first start investing in there, it's very possible that you're one of the people that just sets a target date fund that just goes, I'm aggressive, I'm going to get the aggressive risk investment. Really read through, understand the ins and outs of this. As you start saving more, your balance should be growing. It become more important to you, not that it's important in your 20s and 30s, but really read through all the fine print, look at your investments, potentially start making your own investment mix. From there, if your account balance is growing, it might make sense for you to be asking for help from a financial professional for investment advice, tax planning, and then estate and insurance planning, I think, kind of go hand in hand with life insurance leading into your estate. And then lastly, really consider your major spending. So going back to what I said earlier, your spending is going to be one of the biggest things that you can pay attention to and control on your own. These are the ages where you're starting to really hit those peak earning years, 40, 45, 50. So consider the major spending. Look at the trade-offs between if you really want that beautiful new car today, or is it worth it for you to push it back 5 years and then keep that additional money you would have spent on that and leave that invested, right? And so consider those things that you'd really like to have but could push back.
So you're saying this is the years where, in this era of life, where a lot of times people make a big purchase, right?
Typically,
you
yeah.
See that a lot?
Yep.
So yeah, it really sounds like you're saying this is an age where we should really get our financial life in order. You also mentioned like getting to know your investments, making sure you have the correct investments for you. And if you're wondering if you have those, one thing you could do is go to alerus.com/take flight and listen to last month's risk tolerance webinar, because we talk about finding the investments that are correct for you. Now, of course, we all see this, we all can get thrown off by things like an emergency that happens, right? You mentioned paying down debt. Here's where you're trying to work to get out of that debt, right? And I've noticed, at least in my life, a lot of times where whenever I'm close to getting out of a debt, something always happens. I don't know if anybody listening has had that happen, but something always breaks. The furnace breaks, the roof starts leaking, the car breaks down, something happens. So I think it's also really important to make sure you've built up that emergency savings. And what you could do to get this whole financial life in order is take advantage of the Alerus platform, because Alerus platform will work with you in terms of emergency savings, debt management, like Logan was talking about, planning for retirement, answer some questions to see if you have the right kind of investments for you, insurance management, and if you have it in HSA. So this is where you could really utilize that online tool to do what Logan is saying. And then, of course, if you still want more information, if you'd like to talk to a professional, you can always call the number that you see at the end of this presentation, or fill out the survey and mention that you want it. So, Logan, time is still moving on. We can't stop it. And now we're in the ages of 45 to 60. So this retirement thing is becoming real. We're looking at it and going, you know what? There might actually be a time in my life that I either can't or don't want to work anymore. What do you tell these people?
Yeah, so as you just said, time moves on. This is that range where you start seeing people start to retire, whether you're part of the the FIRE movement, where you're retiring ultra early, or you're retiring 55 to 60 in the still considered early range. This is where adhering to an asset allocation is almost more important than ever before. These are the years where those compounding numbers really start to take place, right? Getting a 10% rate of return when you have a $5,000 balance is a lot less helpful than getting a 10% rate of return when you have 100,000 or more, right? Bigger numbers equal, more return. And so adhering to your asset allocation and not allowing the things that happen in the day-to-day of the stock market change what you're doing with your investments. You have years like this year spook a lot of people, and you say, oh my gosh, the market fell, 30%, my portfolio is down 25%, I can't handle that. You sell out, and then you miss the huge rally that we've had this year. So again, adhering to your asset allocations, very important. From there, looking at the realistic sense of where you are financially. A lot of people say, hey, look, I don't want to work past this date, no ifs, ands, buts about it. I think that that's usually going to be a typical bad scenario, just because if you're doing that, and there's even a slight risk that you might outlive your money. You don't want to be the person who's 70, 75, 80, having to go pick up some minimum wage job because you've been out of employment for 20, 30 years because you outlived your money. So make sure that as you pull the trigger and pull the lever to retire, you have enough dollars for that. And so this might be where you potentially look at working longer. From there, we look at setting a retirement timeline. Be realistic with your goals, with your desires, understand what is realistic, have some flexibility in that retirement timeline as well. Say, I would like to retire at 62 if all things go well. Worst case scenario, 65 is next up. And a lot of these things can be done through what's considered a retirement checklist. And so this is something that we actually have available. We give out when we meet people on site or in person. Obviously, we can't do that with COVID and trying to adhere to the required health and safety guidelines. But this is something that we're able to send you after this is done. And it's just a really easy checklist that as you approach 5 years or less to retirement, you can start checking these things off and making sure that you're prepared and ready for that retirement.
Perfect. I can just imagine a lot of people watching leaning in towards the screen. Don't worry, this isn't meant for you to read that retirement checklist on the screen. But if you would like one, you can always fill out the survey and say, hey, I'd like someone to talk to me about this retirement checklist. I like what you said about be realistic. And of course, we started this whole thing with you talking about control of things that you can control, because I know we saw this year a lot of things you can't control, and 2008, not a lot of people could control anything that happened that year as well. And I'm sure there were people looking at retirement that had to put it off till 2012, 13, 14, or something like that. So look at it for a whole picture thing. People like Logan can help you do that. Now, so we retire. Tell us some things to think about now that we're done. We don't have to go into work anymore. I hear that's the plus part about retiring, not having to go to work. But of course, the downside is that the paycheck stops. So what do you tell people who are in retirement phase right now?
Well, I think that, when you're in retirement, it's not on here. It is very important to really, again, stay on top of your asset allocation, as we just said in the last one. But from there, for retirement, right, we need to know how much do you need per month. It's really important to understand how much money is required to keep the lights on, to keep us and our lifestyle going. How long does that need to last? Obviously, we don't have a timeline on how long we're going to live, right? I'm probably one of many who would say that I don't want to know exactly how long I'm going to live. But even if I could know, I wouldn't want to know. But we need to have a realistic expectation. How old were our parents, our grandparents, our brothers and sisters? How long did they live? Try to figure out what's a realistic timeline, how long this has to last us. consider consolidating or moving. So once you hit that, it used to be 70 and a half, now it's 72. You have RMDs with required minimum distributions. If you have accounts scattered everywhere, it can make your life a little bit painful, and it can be a time-consuming process every year to try and look at all those, or even if not 72 and a half, to try and log into each one of those different accounts to see what those balances are. This is the time where you really want to consider consolidating, making your life easy, making it a one-stop shop, trying to figure out what you have, where you're invested, and if there's any overlap. Next, you have update beneficiaries. This is another one of those that should be done way before retirement as well, but especially in retirement as we're getting older, continuing to make sure that our beneficiaries on everything, our retirement plans, our life insurance, on our bank accounts, on potentially a home deed, on our wills or trusts, that those are up to date. In my mind, you're trading your life energy, your life, to make money, to be able to retire. One of the worst things that I can foresee happening is me spending my life building up this nest egg, something happening to me, and then everything that I've worked for and saved for goes to the wrong person or goes to the wrong place. And so updating those, making sure that those are correct, making sure that the names haven't changed, your grandkids haven't gotten married and changed the last names, can be a pain then. And then lastly, talk to a financial planner. Just as when you're building a house or you are doing anything really big, right, you typically want to at least consult somebody else, even if you're proficient at that. Talking to a financial planner should be no different in the sense of, making sure that you have a second set of eyes, you have enough saved, your retirement goals are realistic, you have a realistic expectation of what to expect through retirement, and having somebody there as an accountability partner is pretty helpful and useful.
Yeah, so it sounds like the key is to get your ducks and get them in a row. get all your ducks in a row. I have a friend who's my age working on her will right now. I know you mentioned that, and yeah, you also mentioned just making life easier for you. You talked about at 72 being forced to take money out of your accounts, and yeah, I see people all the time that throughout their whole life they've got multiple accounts in all these different places, and now the government wants a piece of all of them, and it can get very confusing. So yeah, really good advice. Do you have any final thoughts as we sum it all up here?
No, I think again, retirement is just like a marathon. It's the small steps that we have to take on a daily basis to get there that makes it a successful journey, and not trying to skip over something or saying that it's not important, because realistically, all the little things are what make everything. It's all important. So if you have questions, never hesitate to reach out to myself or somebody else who's professional in this.
And if you're wondering how to do that, you can always call 1-800-279-3200. It's 1-800-279-3200. And you could ask for someone like Logan to talk with. You can also, of course, fill out the survey right after this if you liked what you heard, or maybe you forgot to fill out the one from last week and you'd like to comment on that. And just tell us how you think, what is on your mind, and if you would like to speak to somebody about your finances. As always, the information that you just heard should be taken as general in nature and not as investment advice. That's it for me. Thank you for being here, Logan. What are you going to do with the rest of your day down in South Carolina?
I'm going to take a nice stroll with my dog and just enjoy the 55 degrees here with no snow.
I knew he was going to say that and reference the weather. That's why I gave him the opening to do so. I opened the door. I knew you'd walk right through it. I'm going to stay inside because it's cold up where I am. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. We hope you learned something from Logan. And if you have any questions, you know the number to call, and you can always fill out the survey. Once again, I'm Matt Schartow, and this was the third episode of the Take Flight Financial Wellness webinar series. Take care, everyone, and stay safe. At this point, Anne is back on. If she wants to stop the recording, that is it for the webinar itself. Anne, are there any questions that anybody specifically had for Logan Logan, or I guess for me, but really it'd be for Logan.
You're muted, Ann.
Oh,
One question came up. Someone said they haven't saved enough for retirement. They're in their 50s and they were helping their kids through college and they feel like they're really behind. And did you have any particular, that's a pretty common question we hear, any particular encouragement to them?
Well, that's the typical case, right? It's really easy for us to sit back and say, okay, I'm now 50, what do I do? In that scenario, the best thing that you can do is sit down with somebody, myself or anybody else in the finance industry, and then go through your financial plan. Look at, where are you spending money? Is there any places for us to potentially start saving additional money? Are we not taking advantage